Welcome to Behavioral Health Today, a podcast brought to you by the Triad Network. This podcast is designed to share trending topics occurring within the world and our communities and bring them a behavioral and mental health perspective.
Welcome to Behavioral Health Today. I'm your host, Sharlee Dixon, and today I'm joined by Gabriela Rosa. Gabriela is a renowned fertility specialist, reproductive health educator, and Harvard University awarded scholar, as well as a seasoned entrepreneur. She is the founder and CEO of the Rosa Institute, the world's first fully virtual, holistic fertility clinic, serving patients across more than 110 countries. Gabriela's innovative, science-backed approach has helped over 140,000 couples overcome infertility and recurrent miscarriage, even after years of failed treatments. She's also the host of the TalkSex with Gabriela Rosa podcast, where she continues to break down barriers around fertility, intimacy, and reproductive health. We're honored to welcome Gabriela Rosa to the show today to delve into the often overlooked emotional toll of infertility and how her integrative, trauma-informed approach helps couples navigate this deeply personal journey with compassion, clarity, and a holistic path to healing and hope. Gabriela, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. It's so lovely to be here.
Absolutely. So can you start us off with what drew you to fertility work and what types of personal or professional experiences inspired you to create the Rosa Institute?
You know, it was so long ago. I was a bright, bushy-eyed, as we say in Australia, probably 18-year-old thinking that I would change the world. And I really had this social justice kind of, lens. Also, because I was born and raised in Brazil, you see. And so my parents immigrated to Australia when I was about 12. I really had many of my formative years in a very different culture, not a Western culture that we're used to. And caring for other people was actually really important, where I came from. And so the idea really sparked me up. And the thing that really resonated with me early on, and the idea of kind of going down this path, was this kind of little delusion that I could make the world a better place, one healthier baby at a time, one healthier family at a time. And to be honest, 2.5 decades on, I actually now see that I'm living that dream in many ways, and it's something that has, my entire career. By 2025, I think people have 25 careers by the time they're 25, and I've only ever had one. So I can't speak to anything else other than helping couples overcome infertility, miscarriage, and failed fertility treatments. But I still think it holds true, that when couples experience infertility, one of the things that I notice is that they're so grateful, first of all, to having finally being able to hold their baby. And they have a different attitude towards raising a child in many ways. But also they've had to overcome so many aspects of themselves, in order to transform that diagnosis or those results, that I don't know, it kind of makes people more self-reflective, for one. And I also feel like they really have a different focus on how they want to raise their children, and so that has translated from where I was, in the very beginning, kind of going, well, this is going to be my jazz, so to speak. And so that's what really drew me in. And I also used to work for an obstetrician gynecologist all the way through my studies. And so I used to see lots of babies and pregnant women coming in like literally by the thousands a year, and not many of them, obviously, were there because they were having difficulty conceiving, although secondary infertility was a big thing. And sometimes, the conversation in the office very much was, this person has had a baby, she's now trying, she hasn't been able to. And I used to type all of the doctor's letters in the day where Offer AI and, transcription services didn't exist. Like the actual secretaries used to type the doctor's dictations, nightmarish, that whole thing. But anyway, I learned a lot from it. And, and I think that also sparked my interest. This meeting of worlds that made me decide that, okay, also when you're young, Sharlee, you can't go like, what am I going to do for the rest of my life? I mean, really
Absolutely.
God knows, right? It's like, but this kind of felt like something that would make a difference in the world. And therefore, that's what I went with, at the end of the day.
Awesome, awesome. And you and I briefly just spoke before we got on the call today, and I mentioned that I had some level of challenges with fertility and being able to carry a pregnancy to having a baby and bringing one home. And during that whole process, it was incredibly emotional. However, doctors didn't really want to talk about that. Miscarriages were seen as, oh, it's fine. You can actually get pregnant. It'll be okay. But that is not how it felt to me, to us, to my husband and I. That is not what that felt like at all. And no one really wanted to discuss that heavy emotional toll that it took, not just on myself, but on our relationship. And just kind of looking through your website and doing some research on you, it really seems like helping people navigate that heartbreak of the challenge, because it is, your body is supposed to do something and it's not doing it. And so, in your experience, talk to me about that emotional aspect of infertility, and why is it overlooked by so many and misunderstood?
It's a great question that you ask. And you touched on something that I think is really important to highlight, because I think that in reproductive medicine, there is a huge confusion around what normal actually is. Doctors, they will say to patients, we've done all the tests and everything is normal. And they've been trying for 10 years to have a baby, and they've had 4 miscarriages, and they've done multiple failed IVF treatments. And literally then they're told, well, you have unexplained infertility or unexplained miscarriage.
Yeah.
I think that when you're going through it, there is nothing harder than not having answers, not having some understanding that is concrete about something that you can change and that's something that you can do something about. Going back to what that word normal means in reproductive medicine, normal in reproductive medicine, and hear this is very important. Normal in reproductive medicine does not mean everything is okay. Normal in reproductive medicine means it's common. A lot of people experience it. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't really care if other people experience it.
do.
I don't really care that you don't know why this is not happening. I want to know though, like if I'm going through something that is a challenge and it's against what I would be looking at or what I would want to be experiencing, I don't want to hear that, everything is normal, just keep trying, or it's a numbers game, just keep trying. What is this, roulette? Like
Right.
especially when you are in a situation that feels so vulnerable and you ask the question, what can I do? Is there something I can do to improve the situation? And you just keep being told, no, there isn't. You need to do IVF. And the worst for my patients is that they then go, okay, well, the doctor said that I need to go do IVF. So they go and do IVF. First cycle fails, second, third, fourth. We're staring down the barrel of 8 cycles and they're kind of going, well, clearly we need to do something else. When people have experiencing infertility for a long time, what they don't understand is that they're typically actually experiencing for either fertilization failure or implantation failure, and that embryo is not developing as well as it could. And how do we know that in the easiest of ways? Well, if you've gone down the path of IVF, if you've got an egg and a sperm together, you got an embryo, you got that embryo transferred and you don't see a positive pregnancy test, you absolutely have implantation failure. Nothing is normal about that. And so then we've got a question, and certainly in my clinic, we're very much focused and trained on questioning what are the obstacles. Because in a situation like this, whether it's miscarriage, whether it's inability to conceive, what happens is that people come to me and they will ask the question, I wonder what's wrong. Is there something wrong? I need to find out what is wrong. The truth is that it's not just one thing. Like I often like to say, fertility does not start with the egg, contrary to clickbait headlines. Fertility starts, it's really many biochemical pathways that precede that egg and that sperm actually maturing and forming. So when you're having a challenge, whatever that challenge is, that challenge in itself is an outcome. It's a result of many biochemical chain reactions that preceded it. And, I like to tell the story of the leaking toilet that I had in my house to equate it to what it actually said. Infertility is very much like when you have plumbing issues in your home. And I'll tell you why. I had this toilet that was leaking, and, I got a plumber in, and they basically took the toilet off, they resealed it, they did the thing. 24 hours later, you can use it, it's going to be great. And I had a different bathroom in the same house, the same problem. And I knew it was pretty straightforward. It's kind of like, my secondary infertility story. The first one was fine. Everything was great. They resealed the toilet. It was brilliant. Nothing else needed to be done after that.
Yeah.
The second time around wasn't so straightforward. They resealed the toilet. They came back 4 other times. They then decided that, well, it's unexplained. I don't know what else to do here. I called another plumber, I went to another IVF specialist, got another opinion. Then they're telling me there's probably a leaking from the wall. We need to go outside and look at it. We then need to kind of get this $3,000 machine. And, we're going to have to remove some tiles from the wall. I said, okay, that's where you lost me. Removal of tiles from the wall. Let's just be really clear. I don't have tiles to replace. Therefore, we are going to be removing nothing. So literally I kind of go, okay, that's the no deal. We're not doing that. And I was going on holidays. So I said, look, you know what? I don't want to make this decision right now. Just leave the toilet off the base. And when I come back, I'll decide what to do. And as they did that, I looked around and kind of saw that there was just water everywhere. And I'm thinking, oh God, it's so annoying. And I clearly can't fix it. If I could fix it, I would. I can't, and I don't know what's wrong. And they don't know what's wrong. That's even worse, what is going on here? So anyway, I went away on holidays, come back to a completely dry everything. So I felt very vindicated that my wall was not leaking and that I didn't need a $3,000 machine. Most importantly, that I didn't need tiles off my wall. I was like, yes, I win this game. So anyway, that was fine until I went in the shower. So I turned on the shower, coming back from Bora Bora, it was amazing. Basically, start my shower, turn around, and the floor is literally bubbling up with water. And in that moment, I realized I didn't have a toilet leaking problem. I literally had a shower waterproofing problem, which meant that I didn't need a $3,000 machine and a couple of tiles taken off my wall. I actually did an entire $30,000 bathroom renovation. So it was a deeper problem than we imagined, but at least we found the root cause and we found the solution. And then as a result of that, we had the bathroom renovation. Everything was beautiful afterwards. There was no more leaking toilet and I had a brand new bathroom. But you see, that's what often happens when couples are struggling to hold a baby, to take home a healthy baby, is that there are many different things. Like, for example, in the case of miscarriage, I have done a lot of thinking and a lot of kind of putting together frameworks over the years to try and make sense of where these issues occur, where these challenges occur. And I've come up with, for miscarriage, there's a 9-category framework that I work from when I'm dealing with a couple who is experiencing miscarriage. Because here's what's really interesting and important to understand about miscarriages. Many people think that miscarriages are a woman's issue. They are not, actually. Fertility is a team sport. And what we have is a situation where if a miscarriage occurs, it's not just because of the egg. It's actually because of the egg, the sperm, and the embryonic environment and the embryo itself, right? So there are 3 players here, at least, in this conversation. So when we're looking at what are some of the causes, we need to look at the categories of places, so to speak, where we need to look, because it could be hormonal, it could be anatomical, the shape of the uterus could be playing a role, but it could also be infections. How many times, I had a couple the other day that I did, I often get my patients to come and tell their stories, and we call them creation stories. And this couple had a total of 14 years of infertility. They had done 6 IUI cycles in the second 6 years of infertility. They had done 2 failed IVF cycles. They had experienced like what most couples don't understand what it's like. You know, when in the general population, most people conceive without trying. It's literally 3 conception attempts. Have sex, get pregnant, have a baby done. We're no longer having this conversation. So most people don't understand that when things aren't straightforward, it's not the same as for somebody who it just happens easily for. It's almost like they're different people, okay? And there will be different issues that are getting in the way. And so for this couple, 14 years and all of these different things that they tried, by then, imagine you start trying at 30, you know, or earlier, and then all of a sudden you get to 35 and you're still not pregnant 10 years later, and then you get to 40 and you're still not pregnant. By that point, yes, you are going to start to be told that your eggs are old. But guess what? They didn't start out that way and you still didn't have your result, right?
Right.
So long story short, I started treating them. Also, nobody had ever told him that he had low sperm count. The man had, instead of the usual 20 million sperm, he had 2 million. So it's like, hang on a second. Like, here we have, you know, all of these challenges in conceiving, and nobody has told this man that he has poor sperm count, low sperm count. So we started digging deeper and started to look at what else was going on. And sure enough, it wasn't that the egg and the sperm weren't meeting. This is exactly the situation that I was telling you before. It was that there were other obstacles that were getting in the way. Of course, the sperm not being great quality and all the changing factors, but they both had an infection that we know is demonstrated to cause implantation failure. So they could have done another 10 IVF cycles, continued to be told it's a numbers game. They would have never had a baby unless an infection was resolved, because it was in both of them. So this is the kind of thing that, you know, and these things are not looked at routinely. It's unless people come to someone like us where that we're really like, okay, let's look at everything, right? That we find these things. So, you know, again, going back to miscarriages, immunological components, of course, then you have genetics and epigenetics and how the body actually responds to certain triggers and exposures in the environment. All of that makes a difference. But things like metabolic dysfunction, inflammation, lifestyle factors, and of course, that kind of combination of egg, sperm, and embryo, these are all things that will make a difference. And yet, when people are asking, what else can we do? What else can we test? Oh, no, everything, it's fine. We've done all the tests. And really, the tests that need to be done, there are 4 things. So when somebody is experiencing infertility and they go to a doctor, the medical guidelines, the healthcare system guidelines essentially say that you have to test to make sure that there is a clear patent fallopian tube. We have to make sure that somebody's ovulating. We need to make sure that the uterus is receptive and able to carry a pregnancy to term. And if the husband is there or partner is there, we might recommend a semen analysis. Now, this is the craziest thing. I have seen couples with 10 years of infertility who a man has never had a semen analysis.
Wow.
Yeah, mind blown, right? Because it's like, hang on a second, how did this even happen? And the reason that it happens is because usually the woman drives this. The woman goes to the doctor. And so what happens is they will get those 3 tests, fallopian tubes checked, ovulation checked, and kind of like, you know, the basics, like progesterone on day 21, which usually misses ovulation because some people will have differential, you know, kind of times in which they ovulate. But whatever, it is what it is. And, you know, and do we have a uterus that can hold this pregnancy? So those things are done. The woman walks, and the doctor will usually say, look, it's probably a good idea for your husband to have a semen analysis. But guess what? He wasn't there. And she might tell him or she might not that he needs to go and have a semen analysis. And even if she does, he might just say, you know what, let me put my head in the sand because it's more comfortable there. And so years go by in that kind of situation when either men are not told or they're told and they're like too scared to actually face the situation, too scared to kind of go, well, if I don't know, it's not an issue, you know. And I have opinions about that, but I think we might leave that alone.
Different show, huh?
Different show, entirely different show. Because, you know, really think about it. If you can't rock up to making a baby and actually taking responsibility for your part, how good of a partner in the long term and co-parent are you really going to be? So without going too harsh on the topic, I think that that's something that needs to be questioned. It's not just
Absolutely.
accepted that, oh, he's shy. I mean, hello. So when I open up my legs for the obstetrician gynecologist to like go in there and check I'm not shy. It's okay for
Right.
me, but not okay for you to like do your thing in
Yeah.
the cup. Like, what's the deal here? You know?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, so there's a lot of these kind of like really interesting nuances that happen in dyads, right? In couples kind of doing their thing. But also the healthcare system is really like, I don't blame any one doctor for the lack of proactivity that happens in reproductive medicine because, well, kind of partially, I don't blame them. And I'll tell you why partially. In different healthcare systems around the world, you have different types of experiences. So in universal healthcare systems like the UK, Canada, Australia, the government subsidizes certain numbers, typically about 2 cycles of IVF for treatment. Okay. In privatized systems, it doesn't necessarily happen because it's all for profit. So
Right.
in universal healthcare systems, you have half and half. You have kind of subsidized, you have public, and you have private. So what happens is that there is a huge incentive for more cycles. Because if you think about it, if you can have a baby with 5 cycles and people are still willing to pay for that 5th cycle instead of not needing 5 cycles, needing 3 or 2 or none, from a profit perspective, what do you think that, again, we're not talking at the doctors, we're talking at the clinics
The
and the
system period.
conglomerates
Yeah.
that host these kind of enterprises. It's not really in that enterprise's interest to reduce the number of cycles or not to need it at all. It's,
Right.
you know, so there's conflicting interests and misaligned interests, not only in industry, but also in the healthcare system itself. And if you think about how the healthcare system is structured, is do the absolute least for the most number of people. So infertility becomes underserved because 90% of people conceive without trying in the general population. Literally, all you need to do is look to the side and you'll hear somebody who had a drunken one-night stand and oops, got pregnant, right? Or they basically, you know, my sister or my dog or whoever, oh, they weren't trying, they had an oops baby, right? It's like, well, that is usual. That is common, right? That is what normally happens. When that has not happened, when it hasn't been straightforward like that, well, guess what? Then we need to actually ask for help and escalate that process. And the system's not structured for that.
Right.
You
Absolutely.
see? And so that's why so many couples in the millions are not really taken care of in the way that actually would be in their best interest, but are taken care of in a way that essentially serves other interests. And look, I have no problems with the fact that, you know, for-profit enterprises can actually create innovation at a much higher level than kind of like public and subsidized services and systems. But there has to be kind of a balance in that, particularly when people are really struggling.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
Are you preparing for a licensure exam in psychology, social work, marriage and family therapy, counseling, or behavioral analysis? AATBS is here to help. We have been supporting behavioral and mental health students to prepare for their licensure exams for more than 45 years, working with over 1 million students to succeed on test day and move on to the next step in their career. With products ranging from comprehensive courses to quiz banks and delivered live online, self-study online, and in print, AATBS has test prep solutions that meet every student's needs and learning styles. Visit us today at aatbs.com. That's aatbs.com and use promo code BHT15 to save 15% off your next purchase.
Absolutely. And I mean, it really sounds like you take those couples, those patients who really have been dismissed, discouraged by traditional care, discouraged by the financial costs, but not just that, the emotional toll that I talked about, that just really nobody really discusses that. Nobody digs deep into what that feels like. And then you sit there just looking across the room at that person who had that drunken one night stand, and you're like, wait a minute, what about me?
Absolutely.
And you're in this
Yeah.
system that is not necessarily set up to produce the best results for the most people. It's definitely tough out there for couples that are in this journey. Can you walk us through how you assess and support fertility challenges, and how really emotional readiness can play a role in that evaluation? Because I know that there has to be a certain level of, I know that I can do this, or I need to keep going to get to my desired result. Like, how does someone continue this process for 10, 15 years? Like, how, what is their mindset like to keep going?
That is such a great question. And I think we should start there, which is how do people keep going for 10 or 15 years?
Yeah.
Whenever I'm asked the question, who are your heroes? Who do you look up to? Honestly, it's my patients. Because the level of resilience that a human being needs to have to continue striving in the face of just absolute evidence to the fact that, okay, this is not working. And it's the thing that I want the most in my entire life. Like these people, my patients, they would literally give their life to have a baby if that meant that they would have one. It's like, it's that level, right? And it's not to say that it's right or wrong. I think that it's a values and preference question. There are people who literally, they have dreamt since they were 5 years old of being a mom, of having a baby, of carrying through that kind of legacy in some way, of caring for others in that fashion. And this is the thing that I hear the most from my patients, is that they have always envisioned, there is this kind of like, what keeps them going in essence
Mm-hmm.
is that vision in their mind of what their complete family looks like.
Yeah.
That truly is the only thing. Like, and they speak to this. They say, I just knew. I was actually talking to a patient recently. She's like, I just knew that I was going to have another baby. And she came to us. She already had 2 children. She came to us because she was struggling to have her third. And then we helped her have her third. And then she wanted a fourth. And then we were helping her have a fourth. And she goes, I just knew I had one more baby in there. Like that baby, And this woman, she tried for like, again, 15 years, I mean, as you can imagine. And the first 2 wasn't easy. They both were IVF babies. Then IVF stopped working altogether for her. And so it was like, okay, what else are we going to do here? And so that's the driver. I think that reproduction is so much more than an egg and a sperm meeting. And the outcome of that is so much more than just having a baby. Because if that was the case, although there is the craze now of the reborn babies, right? So people are actually like finding that that's the thing that they're going for. It'd be interesting to see how that actually impacts people actually having babies in the next 10 to 15 years. But what's interesting is that drive, and again, I imagine that people who actually engage in that kind of way of caring for a plastic doll in the same way that they would care for a baby, the feelings would be similar. It's kind of like this whole idea of like, I want to care for something outside of myself. I want to see, except that with a reborn, you don't see them grow. With a baby, there is that whole potential of growth and expansion. And, like it's all the dreams and visions that we kind of been inserted with, except that some people have been inserted with it. My mom was just like, always, do not have children, like not over by the aisle. And, it's so funny because she was a primary school teacher for 35 years. And I think that's probably exactly. That's probably why you're like, what? Like these kids, that's way too much trouble. But all jokes aside, I think that there is definitely that human nature drive to in community, to leave a legacy, to, so The driver is certainly in there somewhere. It's evolutionary, like I don't think that we can say that it's random. It's not random. Like it's just something that obviously we humans are kind of born to do. And I think that also causes a lot of pain for people because they feel like, well, we're just meant to be able to do this. And therefore, if I can't do it, I'm broken and there's something wrong with me. And people
Right.
really internalize that in a really big way. Whenever I hear that, I literally just want to hug my patient and go, you know what? You're okay. It's not that there's something wrong with you. It's obviously there are some obstacles that we need to understand and we need to overcome. But the way that we really approach it, we flip the whole conversation on its head, right? Instead of coming from the place that everything is normal, just keep trying, we actually come from the opposite place, which is what are all of the obstacles? Because they're clearly going to exist if you're not doing the thing that is just normal, right? Which is to have sex, get pregnant, and have a baby. So then what we do is we start very systematically and methodically looking at every possible category of biochemical pathways to figure out what leads to the outcome that we want and what is stopping that pathway from fulfilling itself, from actually, running through its entire process. And we find lots of things, right? We find lots of health conditions, lots of challenges, lots of things that can be improved and optimized. And to me, that's the job. It's actually looking for the things that you could look at a lab reference range and go, yeah, it's within range, but is it optimal? Is it where ideally, if this body was operating at the best possible level, is this ideally where it needs to be? And then from there, we start to kind of group things together and go, okay, what belongs with what? And then at that point, once we kind of have a bit of a picture of that from a biochemical, and these days we have large language models to help us and it makes life a whole lot easier. We used to do all of this by hand. It was like a nightmare. From the perspective of now being able to actually correlate these different pathways and correlate what's going on, you can then from that understand, all right, if these are some of the issues, if we were to apply the 20-80 rule, right, the Pareto's principle of like, what is the 20% of the effort and focus, and where do I need to place that such that would make everything else easier or unnecessary, or some of those obstacles that are present disappear, where do we focus? And that really is our approach. It's very much reverse engineering what is not working to figure out how we're going to make it work. It's very different to, I guess, usual standard therapy, because in standard therapy, it's like, if we have an outcome, whatever, inability to conceive, inability to keep a pregnancy to term, instead of addressing those biochemical pathways from the very beginning. So if you can't see me, my hand is going all the way to the other side. They're kind of like apart from each other. And instead of starting at the very beginning of those biochemical pathways and looking at those chain reactions, IVF really is starting where the problem actually is, which is at the egg and sperm level, right? But that is a result. That's not how it started. There are many things that actually will have to happen for a sperm to even be created. And of course, women are born with all the eggs we'll ever have. And so those eggs mature over time. But the maturation process to having a quality egg versus having an egg that is not going to be able to make it takes actually 12 months. Imagine this, like we're born with all the eggs we'll ever have. From primordial follicle to primary follicle, it's a 4 to 6 month maturation stage. Then from primary follicle to ovulatory follicle, we have another 4 to 6 months. So it's not to say that you can't make improvements much earlier than 12 months. You can. And in each of those maturation cycles, you have the opportunity to be improving and optimizing things and that biochemistry and that environment in which the egg is maturing. Like some people, they will start doing something today that improves their health and they go, I've done it for a day. I'm not pregnant yet. It's like, well, it takes a bit longer than that. Or they've done it for a month and they go, oh yeah, I've done everything and nothing has worked. And then I go and ask them, okay, so tell me what you have done. All right, great, you've done these things. Tell me, how long have you done these things for? A week. Like, okay, we need longer, you know.
Yeah.
And sometimes people think that they're running out of time, but what they're actually running out of is cycles to waste.
Mm.
You see, they're not running out of time to have a baby necessarily. You know, when I did my master's in public health at Harvard, my thesis was looking at our results. And by then I had like 10 years worth of data. We ended up doing a 7-year analysis, 544 patients. And what we found was that on average, those people had been infertile for 4 years, plus or minus 2.5 years. And many of them, almost 50%, had experienced failed IVF treatments. 51.5% before treatment had experienced miscarriages. So then we went and we applied the intervention. We did all the things that we needed to do in the way that I described. And we got an outcome of 78.8% live birth rate. Miscarriage rates dropped to 13.5%. And out of the 78.8%, 47.7% conceived naturally with their own eggs.
Wow.
Meaning that even though they were told IVF is the only way, well, actually, no, it wasn't. What needed to happen is understand what was getting in the way, what were the obstacles, and how do we address them
Wow.
in a very
Okay.
personalized, precise way. Because that's what it takes. It's not a cookie cutter approach that's going to deal with these kinds of situations. You see, when things haven't been straightforward, you can try to get best practice to optimization. And if it's early on, maybe that's all somebody needs. But if the journey has not been straightforward and things have really not taken the path that they needed to take, well, it's the kind of like a cookie cutter approach isn't going to make that happen.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I know that the ultimate goal is to bring babies home and have healthy pregnancies full term, but sometimes that might not be possible. So, how do you help couples decide when it's time to keep pursuing, keep going, let's try new things, let's take a longer time to let's see this work, or when it might be time to kind of figure out what that story may look like, to redefine in their heads what their families are supposed to be? Like how do we help them shift their focus? How do you know when it's time?
I love that question, like really love with triple hearts. And the reason is that it's okay to change your mind.
Mm.
It's okay to decide that you no longer want the thing that you wanted. And, you know, as much as, you know, when people say, I think it's popular culture that if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you know. If it is not a hell yes to stop trying and go and live another life, you're not quite there yet.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And people absolutely, like people know, I've had patients in my program who come in and they're like, and I can picture one beautiful lady in my mind right now who literally had to have chemotherapy. She then got out of that situation and she was able to then start trying to have a baby again. And she kind of spent about 6 months to a year really optimizing her health. And that was her objective. She wanted to optimize her health and give herself the best possible chance of having a baby. We got to about the end of that process, however many months it was several months, it was close to a year. And she goes, Gabriela, I wanted to have a conversation with you because I don't want to have a baby anymore. I actually thought when I started this that I really wanted to have a baby and that I was doing this for the baby, but actually I was doing this just so that I could be healthier. And I actually decided that the family that I have is exactly what I want. And I don't want to keep pursuing this. And I'm like, yay. And so out of the 78.8%, out of the 100% of people in that study, the majority of the people who did not take home babies, there were two major reasons. One is that they decided they no longer wanted a baby. And the second was that they actually needed a different way to have a baby and they didn't want to take that path. For example, with donor egg, right?
Okay.
Sometimes the wonderful thing about being in the 21st century, let's put it this way, let's not date this podcast too much. But the wonderful thing about being in the 21st century is that compared to the 20th century, where I did practice in the 20th century, I can tell you that it was not a situation when I first started practicing that you could put in enough time, energy, effort, and money, and you would end up with a baby. in the 21st century, if you want to put in enough time, effort, focus, energy, and money, you will end up with a baby. And that's the distinction, right? And so the distinction becomes not so much about, is it possible? The distinction becomes about, how much do I really want this? And what are my values and preferences?
Yeah.
So really, and that is such a personal decision that literally only a human person can make for themselves. And what I find that's really fascinating is when that decision comes from a couple compared to when it's differential. It's coming from one person in the couple. And then you end up with questions of, how much do I want this partner? How much do I want this relationship over a baby? And I've had people as well, part of that 20-something%, basically go, I want a baby more than I want this partner. So I'm going to bounce and I'm going to go and find someone who wants the same thing as I do, or I'm going to go and do this on my own.
Yeah.
And, at that point, they leave the program to go and pursue something else. Most of the patients that we treat, we literally hold their hands from beginning to baby and beyond, even when there are these changes in circumstances, right? Most of our patients stay with us. We have a pregnancy program and a postnatal program for that reason. And so, I get to see that we stay in our patients' lives for a long time. Like I literally last year, I started to see something that I was like, I don't know if I loved it or if I hated it. And it's my patients graduating from university and getting driver's licenses and going to the army. And then Facebook starts retargeting me with my patients' babies, as people may know. And I'm like, okay, this is too much for my other half, But yeah, it's interesting how, it really comes down. I think the biggest two words here is values and preferences. And when you're done, if you're doubtful about whether you're done, you're not. Just FYI, if you have a question about, would it be better if I don't have a baby? Not yet. Not yet. You might get to that. You might decide. And also something that is a decision kind of maker for a lot of people is the financial piece. Because it is expensive to have a baby when things have not been straightforward. I mean, mind you, it's expensive to have a baby full
no matter what.
We know that in Western societies, it's $1 million to age 18 or whatever it is. So be prepared to shell out the cash if you're going to have a baby. That's just, and I often say to people, because people complain about the cost of fertility treatment, I say, listen, this is just the first year of you having a baby, just a year before you have a baby. If you can't afford to do that, you cannot afford to have a baby.
Yeah.
It's really that simple, and sometimes people come to, and they don't like when I say that, but that's real. That's the reality. It's like, if you can't afford fertility treatment today, you need to think twice about whether a baby really is the thing that is really truly what you want, or that you're doing this because you think it's what you should do, or because you think that that's the thing that's going to make you happy. I guarantee you one thing, babies are not going to make you happy. That is for sure. They're actually going to make you unhappy most of the time. I have a 13 and 10-year-old to prove it. They're wonderful. I would not want to give them back. But I tell you what, that kid, especially my 13-year-old, Jake, if you're listening, you test me, kid. And so, the reality of it is that if you're going to have a baby, and there was a scientific journal article that I read recently saying that babies do not make you happier. Like having children does not make you happier. In fact, your level of happiness drops for a while, and often it does not recover, and your relationship suffers and often does not recover to the same level. But what people gain from having babies is the sense of purpose and legacy, and that makes it worthwhile.
Right. Absolutely.
I think that's the reframe that a lot of people sometimes need, because also people, especially people who are having fertility difficulties, they romanticize having a baby so much. So then when it actually happens, they feel so guilty about the fact that now that they've got everything they ever wanted and they hate it, because let's be real, postpartum depression is real.
Absolutely.
Postpartum challenges are real. And so when they get to that place where they're literally crying themselves at night for hours because this kid will not be put down
Mhm.
and will not go to sleep, and they have to hold it pacing up and down the corridor for hours in a day for months at a time, and they go, oh my god, how is it that nobody ever told me that it was going to be like this, right?
Mm.
And actually everybody did tell you, you just didn't
You
hear
don't
it,
listen.
want
Yeah.
to hear it, because you thought it was going to be different for you. Well,
Mhm.
here you go. It's a human experience. So just
Absolutely.
wise up now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I
You
wanted
know,
to I
just
want to
let's
ask
have
you.
a realistic expectation. Like I think that that's the
Absolutely.
thing. It's just it's not to kind of like convince people not to do it or to do it. It's just really like go in it expecting that it's going to be hard, that it's not going to be a walk in the park, and be realistic about it. I think that's the message here.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that you are starting to get the Facebook notifications of patients' babies and they're graduating. And I know that that comes with, of course, making you feel a little bit dated. But that means that you've built a clinic that has served patients, over 100,000 patients across the world, having a very successful business for that long is highly commendable. What are the biggest lessons that you've learned as a healthcare entrepreneur, bringing this type of innovation to a very personal field that not a lot of people want to talk about or address?
Gosh, this is an entirely other podcast, because in 24 years, you can imagine that there are many lessons that I
Yeah.
have had. And if I can bring it back into a nutshell, I think the same level of resilience that my patients have to have their babies,
Mhm.
I've had to develop over the years to make it happen, because business is not easy. Dealing
Mhm.
with people, and I have 30 plus staff, is a full-time job,
Yeah.
you know? And so it really is. And look at my team, honestly, like love in my heart for these people, because mostly people see me as the face of the business, but really I would be nothing without them. And I think that that's a really important message, is that, and every person who has succeeded at any endeavor, they will say the same thing. They will say that it is the team that really makes it happen. And so being able to be the person who can develop others to be leaders, that's where the real unlock is, because you cannot do everything. There is just no way. And I think in life in general, like I've had to become very good at delegating, to be able to imagine. I mean, I started working, and then about 10 years, and then I started studying. So I did my first master's. I did my master's in reproductive medicine and human genetics before I had my first child. Then he kind of was going to be born. His due date was on the day of my final exam. So I had to postpone my last semester. So I didn't want to kind of be giving birth to a baby during my exam. Like that would be a big inconvenience. So I decided to postpone it. Exactly. And then after that, basically, I have done multiple other trainings. Like I did a master's in public health at Harvard. I did finishing my doctorate there. But the whole transition from having a business and not having children to then having a business and having one child
Mhm.
was a massive lesson in delegating the things that you really love and care about. So imagine your child, right? And here I am having to work with a team, my nanny, my people kind of in my circle, my team in the clinic to make it happen. So that first transition was the first place where I had to kind of really learn to elevate leaders, like my nanny being the leader of my child when I wasn't there. And then, of course, when I had my second child, I thought I would have all economies of scales on my side. No, 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 no. It's
Mhm.
double the work. There's no
Absolutely.
economy of scale. Even if you
Absolutely.
have, and I thought, oh, this is wonderful. I have two boys. I don't have to
Mm-mm.
buy anything. I
Mm-mm.
have,
Mm-mm.
no,
No.
no,
Mm-mm.
nothing. There is nothing. You get nothing in
Mm-mm.
terms of you just get double the work. And so, then it was that next place. And then I have to lead a child to manage the process and all of that. And since then, and of course, having had two children, I've been back and forth to Boston every 4 months because doing my doctorate is residential in Boston. And my
Wow.
kids stayed in Sydney whilst I was doing that. And most of my team is in Sydney, different time zones, 7 different time zones around the world. I think that the one thing, if there was one thing that I can say that has really helped me and supported me, is equanimity, the ability to hold calm in the face of chaos. Like when everything is going to hell in a handbasket, right? When everything is like absolutely chaotic, to just be able to like go, all right, let's focus in this moment right now within me. Meditation practice, oh my God. If I didn't have that, I don't know where I would be, probably in a mental institution. And so these are the kinds of things that we in business don't necessarily think of as critical must-haves. But in my journey, like training, like I got into bodybuilding when my second son was 2, and that has been a constant for me, because just knowing that having the ability to be strong in my later years and all of the things that comes along with that. And because the same thing happens is that if you don't focus on syntropy, which is the opposite of entropy is where chaos ensues. As you get older, it's natural, like things are going to break down, right? And if you don't focus on the opposite of it, which is syntropy, to actually build the system, well, guess what? You're going to end up with entropy. You're going to end up with chaos. So I kind of gotten that very early on in my late 30s and went, you know what? That's something that I really want to focus on as a pillar for my long-term health and quality of life. And I mean, now these days we see so much evidence, scientific evidence about the importance of exercise and muscle building and the decrease of dementia and all sorts of things. So I kind of feel like that has also been something that has been really important. The other thing that I'll say too is that in deciding to get into bodybuilding and training and doing like pushing really hard weights, I mean, my biggest lift is like 400 pounds, right?
Wow.
So like that, it's proper. And so basically what that has meant over the years is that, and we know this from psychology, that when you do really hard things in one area of your life, that becomes a transferable experience and being able to actually cope with and be more resilient in other areas of your life. So I have found that has also helped me. So meditation, training, and just as much as possible in my day-to-day focusing on that equanimity, calm in the face of chaos, has been a very valuable practice over the years and has really benefited my business in many, many ways. Has not been easy. It has not been easy. That's my first baby, honestly. You know, if I'm honest, it's definitely my first baby. It's the one that I've poured the most love and money and time and up until now. But yeah, and continue to. But it's been very rewarding over time. I have certainly grown immensely from the experience.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And as we begin to wrap up today, for the listeners who want to learn more about your work and connect with the Rosa Institute, where is the best place for them to start?
So they can Google my name, Gabriela Rosa, GabrielaRosa, and they will find lots of things over the decades, lots of faces of Gabriela. So Gabriela Rosa Fertility, or they can go directly to my website, which is fertilitybreakthrough.com. So fertilitybreakthrough.com is the place to go. We have resources available. In fact, Fertility Breakthrough, Overcoming Infertility and Recurrent Miscarriage When Other Treatments Have Failed, is my latest book. It's available free on Spotify and YouTube. So people can also get it on every bookseller, but basically it's on those platforms. And there is a program that I run called the Fertility Challenge, which is a free educational program where people can literally, so if you Google Gabriela Rosa Fertility Challenge, you will find where to register and all the information that you need about it. But that's one of the programs that we've taken over 140,000 people in more than 111 countries through over the years. And it's one that I absolutely, whether you are just starting out on your journey to parenthood, or whether you've been at it for years and it hasn't been straightforward and it has been, really a challenge, overcoming the fertility challenge is something that I highly recommend. And doing that program is certainly something that will be very beneficial. And like I said, it's completely free. So people can just register and participate. There's thousands of dollars worth of prizes that we give away. So it's a really cool, like we give away scholarships for the Fertility Breakthrough Program, which is our signature program. We now have a new program called Fast Track to Baby, which is more about the evidence-informed practices that people can put in place to optimize their fertility and reproductive health for having a baby. So, those are some of the prizes that people get, but there's lots more. So highly recommend that.
Awesome. And thank you so much for sharing those resources with our listeners. Gabriela, I really could probably talk to you for the rest of the day, but I really appreciate you speaking with us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you to our listeners for taking the time to join us. You can follow us on our social media at Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and more. We're even on YouTube at Behavioral Health Today. And make sure to give our show 5 stars and leave us a review. That helps our show get discovered and share the valuable insights in each episode. As always, the resources for this episode and an archive of all of our other episodes can be found on our webpage at triadhq.com/BHT. And we look forward to having you back with us next time on Behavioral Health Today.
We appreciate all the support from our community, and if you like our show, one of the best ways you can support it is by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review. Behavioral Health Today is a podcast part of the Triad Behavioral Health Network, all rights reserved.